Ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin with a story of numbers and purpose. The number 12 has always been symbolic. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples, 12 gates to the heavenly city. But today I want to talk about 12 in a new light. 12, God said, prepare for the final plan. This isn't about fear. It's not about endings. It's about alignment. It's about understanding that our lives were never meant to be random, but orchestrated. The why? Rediscovering the voice that called you when God said prepare for the final plan. He wasn't introducing something new. He was reminding us of something ancient, something written deep into the design of who we are. Before God gives you the what, He always starts with the why. And the problem today is that most people are moving so fast trying to achieve the what that they've forgotten why they even started. The most powerful leaders in the world, the most transformational stories in Scripture, all began with a clear and deep sense of why. Abraham left his homeland not because he had a map, but because he trusted the voice that called him. Moses returned to Egypt not because he knew every detail of the deliverance, but because he understood the why behind the mission: freedom for his people. Esther stepped into the king's court, risking her life, not because she had political leverage, but because she knew deep in her soul that she had come into the kingdom for such a time as this. We are a generation obsessed with action, plans, blueprints, strategies, hustle. But God has never been impressed with motion for the sake of motion. He's always been interested in alignment. And alignment starts with knowing your why. So when God says prepare, He's not saying hustle harder. He's saying pause, reflect, return to your core, because the final plan isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters most. And that starts when you know who you are and why you're here. We were created for connection, to God, to purpose, to people. But in a world full of distraction, noise, and comparison, many of us have disconnected from the deeper voice that once stirred us. That voice is still speaking, and it's saying, come back to your why. Why do you get up in the morning? Why do you build what you're building? Why do you lead the people you lead? If the answer is only about survival, then you're still living beneath your potential. But when the answer becomes about service, purpose, legacy, that's when preparation truly begins. That's when heaven starts aligning resources, people, and opportunities around your obedience. God's final plan isn't about judgment, it's about alignment. He's setting things in order. He's calling people back into position. The generals are waking up, the creatives are waking up, the intercessors, the business leaders, the shepherds, the teachers, all being reawakened by the why behind the calling. And the truth is, the world doesn't need more busy people, it needs people who are lit up with purpose. People who lead not from ego but from calling. People who show up not just to achieve but to transform. When you know your why, every obstacle becomes fuel, every delay becomes preparation, every failure becomes redirection. Because when your why is clear, your heart becomes unshakable. This is why the number 12 matters, because 12 is a signal. It's a spiritual timestamp. God is saying, I'm about to move. I'm about to act. But first, I want to know, do you remember your why? That's the real question of the final plan. Not are you perfect, not are you famous, but are you aligned? Are you connected to the purpose I gave you before the foundation of the world? If you want to be part of what's coming, don't start with goals. Start with your why. Rediscover the voice. Return to the mission. Because only people with a clear why will have the strength, clarity, and resilience to walk confidently into the final plan. The call. The invitation to build before the storm. Every great movement in history, every shift in destiny begins with it never starts with clarity, it begins with disruption. It begins with an interruption to ordinary life. When God said, prepare for the final plan, He wasn't delivering a warning, He was extending an invitation. A sacred call to those who have ears to hear and hearts ready to respond. And here's the truth. God doesn't call the prepared, He prepares those He calls. The beauty of the call is that it usually doesn't come when we're ready. It comes in the middle of ordinary days. Moses was tending sheep, David was delivering lunch, Mary was minding her own business. But the call has a way of showing up and shaking the routine. And when it does, it always begins with one simple instruction: prepare. But preparation isn't passive. It's not waiting around for a sign in the sky. It's active faith. It's obedience in motion. It's trusting the voice even when you can't trace the plan. Think about Noah. God didn't hand him a finished ark. He gave him dimensions. He gave him instructions. But the building, That was Noah's responsibility. He had to start hammering before the rain came. He had to prepare before there was even a drop of water in the sky. Most people want confirmation before they take action, but heaven operates differently. God gives a call and your response determines the next step. It's the willingness to build in silence, to obey in obscurity, that unlocks the next layer of the plan. You can't wait for the storm to start preparing. By then it's too late. The ark isn't built in crisis, it's built in consistency. What separates the called from the comfortable is not talent, it's obedience. It's the willingness to move when no one else understands why you're moving. It's saying yes when the world expects you to say no. It's following divine instructions that look foolish to everyone else, but make perfect sense in the bigger picture of eternity. And let's not pretend preparation is easy. It's often lonely. It requires sacrifice. It asks you to turn down the noise of culture so you can tune in to the frequency of heaven. Preparation isn't glamorous. It doesn't trend, but it builds something unshakable. It carves out space in your soul for purpose to grow. When God calls, He's not just speaking to your ears, He's speaking to your identity. He's reminding you of who you really are. The call isn't about pressure, it's about positioning. God sees what's coming, and He's getting you ready. Because when the final plan begins to unfold, the ones who answered the call will be the ones standing strong, not because they had all the answers, but because they had the courage to say yes when it's still the most dangerous place to be in any season is unprepared, not because God will punish you, but because you'll miss the opportunity to step into alignment. The call is never about perfection, it's always about participation. God doesn't need your qualifications, He needs your obedience. The question is not, are you capable? The question is, are you available? The voice of God is calling again in this generation, not through burning bushes or booming thunder, but through stillness, through conviction, through urgency. He's saying, get your house in order, build what I told you to build, let go of what I never gave you, trust me with what comes next. This is what it means to prepare, to believe before you see, to build before you understand, to follow before the plan is clear. Because that's the nature of the call. It doesn't come with a guarantee, it comes with an invitation. And the only way to respond is to move. The alignment, the power of realigning with heaven's blueprint. There's something sacred about alignment. When the stars align, we marvel at the beauty of it. When a team aligns, it becomes unstoppable. And when a life aligns with the divine blueprint, the impossible becomes inevitable. God's instruction to prepare for the final plan is not just a call to action, it is a call to alignment. Because preparation without alignment is just busy work. But when you're aligned, every step, every breath, every decision carries weight, purpose, and power. Alignment isn't about perfection, it's about position. It's about bringing your life back into sync with what heaven already sees about you. The world is full of talented people who are wildly out of alignment, running fast in the wrong direction, achieving goals that were never meant for them, exhausting themselves in cycles of success that feel strangely empty. But the truth is, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, if you're headed the wrong way. In every major story of faith, there comes a moment where alignment changes everything. Saul had power, status, and zeal, but he was misaligned until one moment on the road to Damascus. When God intervened, Saul didn't become someone new, he became who he was always meant to be. He didn't gain a new mission, he was finally aligned with the one that had been waiting for him since birth. That's what alignment does. It doesn't make you different, it makes you authentic. We live in a world that celebrates ambition, but God honors alignment. Ambition says go further, alignment says go true. Ambition chases success, alignment chases significance. And when you're aligned, even the smallest act of obedience becomes powerful. You begin to walk in step with something greater than yourself. Your decisions are no longer reactive, they are strategic. Your time is no longer random, it is intentional. You stop chasing opportunity and you start moving in divine rhythm. God has always worked through order. 12 tribes, 12 apostles, 12 gates. These weren't random numbers. They were symbols of structure. And when God says 12, He's not just giving you a countdown. He's pointing to a heavenly structure He's bringing back into the earth. He's calling people into places of alignment so that His final plan can unfold without obstruction. When lives are aligned, families heal. When callings are aligned, culture shifts. When nations align, destinies are rewritten. Alignment doesn't mean everything makes sense. It means everything is in the right place. You may not see the whole picture, but you can trust the hand arranging the pieces. Just like a compass needs to be calibrated to point north, your soul must be calibrated to truth. That's what time in God's presence does. That's what prayer does. That's what surrender does. It brings your heart back into proper orientation, not to religion, but to relationship, not to pressure, but to purpose. The reason many people feel stuck is not because they lack talent or opportunity. It's because they're out of alignment. They're saying the right things, but their hearts are somewhere else. They're building something God never asked for, and they wonder why there's no peace. True peace doesn't come from achievement, it comes from alignment. Peace is the fruit of being where you're supposed to be, doing what you were created to do in the timing heaven has ordained. Alignment unlocks acceleration. Once you're in the right position, what used to take years can happen in days. Doors open, relationships appear, resources flow. Why? Because you're no longer forcing things. You're flowing in the current of God's design. That's the power of alignment. And that's why when God says prepare, He's not just asking you to do something, He's asking you to become someone. Not someone new, but someone real, someone aligned, someone ready. The alignment, finding the true north of your purpose. Alignment is not a concept, it's not a trend, it's a return. A return to the path you were always meant to walk. A return to the identity you were always meant to live. When God said prepare for the final plan, He wasn't talking about making ourselves busy. He was calling us back to the place of alignment, where who we are, what we do, and why we exist finally match up under His design. Because without alignment, even good things become distractions. We've all felt it. That inner dissonance when the outer life looks right, but something deep inside feels off. You're successful, but you're tired. You're achieving, but you're anxious. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel disconnected. That is what misalignment feels like. You may be doing the right things, but in the wrong order. You may be saying yes to everything, but you were only built to say yes to one thing. Purpose. When God sets things in motion, He does it with precision. 12 tribes, 12 apostles, 12 months. It's never chaos. It's structure. It's government. It's order. And when He says prepare, He is not inviting you into panic. He's inviting you into order. That means putting your soul, your thoughts, your time, your resources, and your relationships under the leadership of His plan. It's not about being religious. It's about being aligned with heaven's intention for your life. In a world obsessed with achievement, alignment is revolutionary because it forces you to slow down, to listen, to ask better questions. Instead of what should I do next, you begin to ask, what was I born to do now? Alignment doesn't begin with movement. It begins with honesty. It asks you to step away from the noise, from the endless scrolling, from the pressure to perform, and sit with the deeper voice inside, the one that still whispers, this is the way. Walk in it. The tragedy is that many people are not lazy, they are misaligned. They're grinding in areas they were never called to, hustling for things that don't bring fulfillment, impressing crowds that were never part of their assignment. And so they burn out, not from effort, but from internal contradiction. You can't live a life of peace when your heart is headed in one direction and your decisions in another. That's why alignment matters, because it brings your actions into agreement with your calling. When a plane is off course by even 1 degree, it will miss its destination by miles. That's what happens in life. A small misalignment, left uncorrected, can take you far from the place God intended for you. The grace in the instruction prepare is that it gives you a chance to course correct before the pressure increases. It's a chance to recalibrate your internal compass and find true north again. Alignment is not flashy. It's not loud, but it is powerful. When your gifts, your values, your relationships, and your energy all point in the same direction, you become unstoppable. You don't have to force doors to open. You don't have to manipulate outcomes. You don't even have to prove yourself to people. You simply walk in sync with the God who already saw the end from the beginning and positioned you in this generation for this moment. So the question isn't just whether you're working hard. The question is, are you aligned? Are you saying yes to what God has called you to? Are you walking in obedience or just movement? Because one small adjustment in your posture today could position you for impact tomorrow. This is the time, not for scrambling, but for synchronizing, not for building empires, but for building what God actually asked for. And that begins not with striving, but with alignment. The silence, where God speaks the loudest. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of focus. And in the chaos of this world, silence has become one of the most misunderstood, underestimated forces available to us. When God says, prepare for the final plan, many people expect a loud trumpet, an earthquake, a burning bush. But what if the real preparation starts in the quiet? What if God's loudest instructions are still delivered in whispers? We live in a time where noise is constant. Notifications, opinions, headlines, advice, distraction, it's everywhere, it's normal. But it's also dangerous, because the enemy of clarity is not confusion, it's noise. Confusion is easy to fix when you can think clearly, but noise is harder. It masks clarity, it drowns out discernment. And slowly, without realizing it, we become addicted to movement, addicted to stimulation, afraid of the stillness where real answers live. In Scripture, God rarely shouted, he whispered. Elijah found him not in the wind, not in the fire, not in the earthquake, but in the still, small voice. Jesus, even while carrying the weight of humanity's redemption, withdrew often to solitary places to pray, not to escape, but to align, not to disconnect from the world, but to reconnect with heaven. Silence wasn't a retreat, it was a strategy. That's why silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. In the stillness, you gain what noise can never give: clarity of thought, purity of motive, and strength of direction. And when God is preparing you for something great, especially something final, he often leads you into seasons of silence, not because he has nothing to say, but because he wants you to hear differently. When God is about to shift your life, he silences the room. He removes distractions. He shuts doors. He delays responses, not to frustrate you, but to tune your ears, to help you hear not just the next instruction, but the deeper purpose behind it. Because what's coming in your life will require a level of trust that can't be built in a crowd. It's forged in the quiet. Many people fear silence because in silence you meet yourself. You face your questions, your doubts, your insecurities. But what if those quiet moments aren't the enemy? What if they're the doorway? What if the silence is sacred space where heaven is closest and transformation begins? You see, God doesn't compete with noise. He doesn't yell to be heard. He waits for those who are willing to lean in, to clear the clutter, to sit in discomfort until they hear something eternal. That's where divine direction is born. That's where burdens are lifted. That's where identity is restored, not in the crowd, but in the quiet. When preparing for the final plan, silence becomes a tool, a training ground, a reset button. Because if you can't sit with yourself, you can't lead others. If you can't hear God in the quiet, you'll mistake noise for guidance. You'll chase what's urgent instead of what's important. But when you learn to embrace the silence, it becomes your secret weapon. You carry a stillness that confuses chaos. You walk with a confidence that doesn't need to shout. Silence is not a delay. It's a design. God uses it to detox your soul from distractions, to awaken your spirit to deeper truths, and to anchor your feet before the storm begins. Some of the most profound shifts in your life will begin with a whisper you almost missed because you were looking for thunder instead of truth. So don't fear the quiet. Don't resist the pause. Lean in, listen, because in the silence, God is preparing you not just to hear, but to lead. And what you receive there will shape every step you take when the plan begins to unfold.